Very interesting video for you right here. We've got two cops discussing the statement, all cops are bad. The cop or former cop on the left is Dominic Rizzo. The cop on the right is Ted Stern. He's with a YouTube channel called Fit Responder. This right here is Dominic's channel. This right here is Ted Stern's channel. I'm going to leave the links in the description for you so you can check out the entire conversation. This is pretty lengthy and I was able to distill some of it. And if you're interested, in the future, I could do a live stream on this because this is over an hour, I think an hour and 20 minutes long. I've distilled down the pertinent parts. But again, the statement is that they're talking about, and there's some crazy admissions in this video that we're about to watch. But the statement is all cops are bad. Dominic Rizzo right here on the left says, yes, that's a true statement. All cops are bad. Let's check this out.
Public sucks. The public are scum, and they're never going to change. The public are always looking to vilify the police. The public will never take responsibility for ever. So it's my job, if I willingly choose to do this profession, and every day I get up and I got to put that uniform on, I'm not going to go in to look at it as I'm going to make a difference in the world.
Now, this is interesting because Dominic Izzo here has a great disdain for the public, and he generalizes the public, and he says the public sucks. Now, it's true that it is a generalized statement saying all cops are bad, but there is an objective basis for that. We're going to go over that in a minute.
No, I'm going to sit there and be the best version of myself, because it doesn't matter if it's little, 80-year-old woman who's down the street and she's pissed off because her neighbor's dog is outside barking at 2 o'clock in the morning, or if it's a person who's just had a drive-by, at their home, or somebody stabbed or whatever. It did not matter what the call is. Some human being, either because they legitimately needed help, or because we're their employees. They pay our salaries. They expect it. It didn't matter what it was. I had to curb my ego, show up, and I had to be the best version of myself. And that to me was like, damn, this is, now I was 39 or 40 at the time when that realization set in. And I went, this is a massive responsibility that as a younger man, I just didn't appreciate. It's like, I have the opportunity to thanklessly, because they don't give a shit, but I get the opportunity to go in every day and actually be the best version of myself. How do I do that? So I saw that as a daily challenge. I saw law enforcement, being a cop, as one of the best outlets for self-perfection. I speak about cops as if they're lower than shit. I am unbelievably critical, and that ruffles the feathers of a lot of police officers. It really does. And we'll get into that. I became extremely self-righteous in the last 5 years of my career, where I hated what command staff could do to cops. And my disdain for law enforcement always began with command staff. I watched how they violated the same shit that they've strung cops up on a daily basis, how they went from patrol to sergeant. And the next thing they're doing is they're disciplining guys for the stupidest shit on the planet because they can. And it's a power trip. So because I was in a great position, I didn't care if anything happened to me.
In my opinion, he hypocritically makes a distinction between regular beat cops and command staff, and he makes quite a few contradictory statements. He's a tangent talker and doesn't stay on point, and he doesn't substantiate his statements. He says all cops are bad, but then he puts the bulk of the badness on command staff when he later admits that all cops are bad and all cops have your freedom and your life in their hands. And more often than not, they're going to railroad you, especially if they're having a bad day or if you talk back. So this is beyond command staff. And that's part of the hypocrisy and part of the contradiction of, as he's trying to explain to Ted Stern here, that all cops are bad. He was that bad cop, but then he tries to paint himself out as, hey, I was just trying to make the world a better place.
If I got fired or if I was forced to resign, I didn't have mouths to feed. It was just me. So I took on positions that were against the command staff. And where I started to get really salty was the air quotes brothers in blue that wanted me to write the letter of no confidence and demand the chief's resignation. the ones that wanted me to file the lawsuit, the ones that all stood behind me, they were like cockroaches when the lights came on. When it came down time for them to have my back, well, I can't. So I will say this. Everybody accuses me. You're bitter. You're just salty. You hate what happened to you. I'm heartbroken. I am devastated to what happened to me. I loved that profession. I am 100% bitter and angry and salty.
And that's part of his contradiction. And on the one hand, he says command staff is bad. The fellow Thin Blue Line gang members don't have my back when it's absolutely necessary. He says the entire system is corrupt from top to bottom, and yet he says he loved that profession that specialized in trampling people's rights and even taking their lives.
On a lot of avenues, but it happened for a reason, and I can speak out now. So anything that could question my integrity or my ability to speak on the subject needs to be called out. So again, whatever dirt people want to bring up, it's all out there. My disciplinary file, I've made public. I've shown the letters of reprimand. I've shown the letters of where it was claimed, and I'm not going to get too long-winded on this, but I showed how during the process of my paid administrative leave, all of a sudden it was like they started manufacturing charges that were never addressed. And then I got to address those during a deposition, which was great. But again, I started with command staff, and I could not believe how the police officer, the American police officer, is pressured on a daily basis from their family life, then the people on the street, and command staff. And they're the least protected. The patrol officer is the least protected member of our society today. And that should put them in a position to standing up bigger than everybody else. And they don't. And that catapulted into my whole, what seems to be I hate cops rhetoric.
That is a crazy statement right there. The patrol officer is the least protected member of our society today. That is ridiculous. With all the qualified immunity that they have, with all the looking the other way from command staff, it seems, in video after video, where they're not just running roughshod over people's rights, they're actually torturing them by tasing them like Johnny Wheatcroft, or offing them like Johnny Hurley, after Johnny Hurley got done saving 3 cops from the Arvada Police Department. So it's crazy to me that he says one of the least protected members of our society is the patrolman, when the patrolman is the most aggressive member of our society, economically terrorizing the rest of us. They don't give a damn about our rights, and they don't give a damn about our lives. All they care about is going home safe. There's so many contradictions in what this guy says. I would like to, if Dominic Izzo is listening to this broadcast, I would like to talk to you, because the whole foundation for why you say cops are bad, but then you say that there are cops that are good, and this guy's the least protected member of society, but these people don't have our backs, and it's the command staff's fault. There are some thoughts that need to be organized here, and they're not exactly organized in this interview.
On the one hand, you're saying, these patrol officers, they're a vulnerable class. And then on the other, I look at your social media, and you made a statement: all cops are bad.
100%.
So do you believe all cops are bad?
I do, and I'll explain why for a second.
He says all cops are bad, but he says bad members of society are the least protected. Why would anybody be incentivized to protect a bad member of society?
You have to understand that it's a mindset, and it's a standard. And if I come up with an analogy, I can come up with several. It's ownership. I function, this is me personally. I don't know how old you are. I was born in 1975. I come from a place of negative reinforcement, and I'm not looking for, poor me or whatever. I came from nothing was ever good enough. You're shit. I came from you suck, whatever it was, and I thrived.
This is a long story that has nothing to do with Ted Stern's question. Hey, you say all cops are bad. Why do you say all cops are bad? Dominic Izzo agrees that all cops are bad, but then he goes into this rabbit hole story that really has nothing to do with the question.
Off of that kind of negative reinforcement. My mother was unbelievably non-affectionate. I don't remember ever hearing her say, I love you. And I know that stemmed into me striving for praise from other people. Negative reinforcement is it's the biggest motivation for me. You're into fitness like crazy. If I came to you for fitness advice and you were, oh man, you got this and blah, 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 I wouldn't respond to that. As a peer, as a man, if you looked and said, dude, you're a loser piece of shit, how can you even remotely get your next level of shattering every one of the expectations you set for me? That's how I function. That's my mindset going for law enforcement. I have a very black and white view.
When I went through this earlier, I knew that he was a tangent talker and he doesn't get straight to the point, and he's got all these stories and rabbit holes that he goes down. But I'm going to sit here, I'm going to hit the highlights, because when you make the statement, all cops are bad, you need to substantiate that statement. If you say all brain surgeons are bad, and they talk about brain surgeons, or all pharmacists are bad, or all teachers are bad, then you need to substantiate that thing that ties all of them together and makes all of them bad. And there's only one profession that I know of that you can do that with, and that's law enforcement. And I'll get to that in a second. I will prove to you before the end of this video why all cops are bad, not why I think all cops are bad, or it's just my opinion that all cops are bad. There is an objective logic trail that you can follow that objectively determines that, yeah, you're right. Given that right there, and given that they did that, this is what that makes them across the board, every single one of them that partakes in this profession.
It's 2024, and we still have an epidemic of unbelievable, stupid police officers on the street, which we know why that is. Hiring process and command staff. And they said, we own this. And
it's not just hiring staff or hiring requirements, low standards for hiring cops or command staff. It's not just that. It's that people who want that position desire power over others. And so what you have is power corrupts and absolute, power corrupts absolutely. But what you have that's more specific is that power, and that's what the position of law enforcement is, power attracts the corruptible. People who are normal don't want to exercise unbridled authority over other human beings. People who are abnormal and psychopathic do.
Oh, we have to humanize the badge. It's a bad day for a cop. You don't know what it's like to go out there. We make excuses. This profession has the day-to-day right and responsibility, right? The lawful right and responsibility to take away somebody's freedom and or life if lawfully necessary. And we want to just give people excuses. We need to know what happened beforehand. We need to know what's going on. If that person just wouldn't have resisted, it's a standard. The American citizen, again, are just scum. They're not good people. Inherently, as human beings, we are scum.
This man has great disdain for the public. And I think it's projection, because he's a member of the public. And he's basically saying all the public is shit. They suck. They're horrible. They're nothing. I'm not horrible and nothing. Are you? You know your character. I know my character. I'm not included in that. But he's including himself and everybody else in this. And usually when people do that, they're just projecting what they are.
You know, if anybody is Christian, you know that you can't do any works to get into heaven. You are saved by Christ, if that's your belief. So you're born with original sin, if you're Catholic as well, too. You can't hit the ceiling of a standard set, but you can always strive for it. And I'm getting long-winded, and I know it. Ultimately speaking, my view is, and it comes from my wrestling background, being coached.
He's long-winded. When he talks, he doesn't stand point. He's very scattered. There's a lot of rabbit trails, and he goes completely away from what should be being discussed, and that is substantiating the statement, all cops are bad.
I don't care what you did yesterday. What are you doing to get better tomorrow? And that goalpost keeps moving and moving and moving. And ultimately, it's the individual who's chasing it, saying either I want to keep chasing, no, I'm never going to catch it, or fuck this, I'm done. So I have a huge love for the profession of law enforcement. I think it's the greatest profession on the planet, and it requires the highest standards in the world of a profession.
He has great respect for a profession that he has already admitted is systemically evil, that's filled with bad actors, but he has a great respect. How do you have a great respect for a position that literally draws psychopaths into its power ring? I don't understand that, unless there's something wrong with this guy.
If we had the number of doctors and brain surgeons who fucked up almost willfully, we would be outraged. Lawyers.
Now, he says almost willfully, but stay tuned, because he's going to prove that not only he, but also Ted Stern, while they were in positions within law enforcement, willfully committed evil against other people. Willfully. Not almost willfully. They intentionally did it.
We'd be outraged. But we give police officers a big pass. I'll wrap this up because there's so much to talk about it. My view is I want, and it's a certain type of person I'm looking at, right? My view is always, I'm never going to be good enough for something, so I have to continue to strive. So in my view, every motherfucker is bad. Keep striving. And it sounds sadistic, but it's pressure testing.
Oh, I appreciate that.
So basically he's saying, I'm saying all cops are bad from my perspective, because from my perspective, I thrive in an atmosphere of negative response. What I'm getting from what he's saying is he believes, in his opinion, all cops are bad because of the stimulus that he responds to, which is ridiculous.
I mean, I can definitely agree with you on the last point that it's a very important career. And I mean, if you're relating it to doctors and whatnot, they have a lot more education and training, and arguably so should law enforcement, right? So we don't have so many errors. But on the one hand, you're saying, hey, I like the idea of negative reinforcement. You know, if you're coaching somebody, you might say you're being a piece of shit right now and you suck, and you hope that they respond like you might, like, okay, well, I need to be better then. But of what value is it to say literally all? Is that a logic? Like, do you mean logically, literally, every single cop is bad? The moment they get the badge and they're sworn, they are now bad just through association as being a part of this group. And you can say
the association from.
That's actually a very good question, because it gets Dominic away from his feelings and away from his opinions. And he's looking for something, Ted Stern is looking for something logical and objective to hang his hat on.
You could say this group as a whole is not performing like they should, right? And you could say it's riddled with a bunch of bad cops. You could, I mean, definitely, but now somebody who's just signed up, they have great intentions. I want to improve my department. I want to act righteously and in accordance with the Constitution. Are they bad?
And I think it's appropriate to say right here what Daniel Webster said. He said, good intentions will always be pleaded for every assumption of authority. They mean to do well, but they don't do well. Not by you. They'll do well by them. They mean to govern well, but they mean to govern. They promise to be good masters, but they mean to be your masters. Good intentions, they don't count, because people use that as a justification to assume authority over you. And you have to comply. And if you don't comply with my authority, then you're in the wrong and I'm in the right.
The entire system, bad is subjective, right? Bad's going to mean different. And it's going to be on whatever level it is. The entire system is
No, it's not. It's really not subjective. It depends on what you're talking about. If you're very specific, bad is not subjective. Abusing children is bad, and that's not subjective. Harassing somebody and taking away their rights, and if they did the same thing that you did, they would be put into a jail cell. That's not subjective. That is bad. That is objectively bad. Now listen to what he says about the whole system is corrupt. The system that he respects. He respects law enforcement, but then admits that law enforcement is corrupt. It's all bad.
The entire system is fucked up. Do you, and again, I will never skirt an answer, but I'll try to come up with analogies.
The entire system is effed up, and I respect that system. In my opinion, you have to be a pretty effed up person to respect a system that you admit is effed up.
I mean, it's 2024, and we still have a never ending supply of videos of even like traffic stops where cops sit there and they violate somebody's First Amendment. Do you agree that that specific problem is bad for law enforcement?
Of course.
All right. We have to start there.
Yeah.
I did this years ago, and I'll ask you questions. And the only way this works is if you're 100% honest, because people were asking me too. Well, that means that you were bad. 100% I was. Every thing that I accuse people of doing, I've probably done.
That means he was a hypocrite, portraying himself as something he's not, and yet he continued through with his hypocrisy for 16 years. This guy was on the force for 16 years. What kind of person does that make you? This is super eye-opening.
Everything. All the way from shut your fucking mouth, you're going to go to jail, all the way from fucking disrespecting people, all the way from roughing them up a little bit. Everything I fucking did, I accuse other people of. I did first, and I'm aware of it.
I appreciate this guy's honesty. And can you imagine exponentiating? Stay tuned, because I'm gonna objectively prove to you the statement, all cops are bad. I appreciate the fact that he's being honest, that he was an absolute abject hypocrite, a very, very bad person, knowing that he was doing wrong by the public. And yet he continued to stay in that profession. That is a serious psychological problem.
Have you ever sat there, have you ever based your traffic citation off of the attitude of a driver?
Like whether I write him a citation or not? Absolutely.
Okay.
Of course.
He said, absolutely, of course. So Ted Stern admits that he has written a citation based on the attitude of the member of the public that he's dealing with. We know this happens. But to listen to somebody admit it, and I appreciate the admission, but he says absolutely, of course, kind of like, yeah, that kind of goes with the territory. That's kind of what we do. That's what law enforcement is all about. Mind blown. Completely mind blown, because you can objectively prove that law enforcement is bad. But unless you've actually been in law enforcement, if you watch the bad things happen and then you like blew the whistle on a bunch of corrupt cops and then they, jeopardize your life or kick you off the force, unless you've actually been in somebody's shoes, you've not experienced it yourself. I can mentally grasp and explain why all cops are bad, but unless I experience it, which is a completely different level, it's a way higher level. Not only do you have the knowledge, not only can you articulate it, not only can you objectively show that all cops are bad, I went through it. I saw it with my own eyes. And we see it with our own eyes on our side of the police officer's nightstick or taser or them putting the cuffs on too tight. We see it from our perspective, but these people are talking about it from their perspective. So Dominic Izzo asked Ted Stern, have you ever given a citation based solely on the attitude of the individual, the member of the public you're dealing with? Absolutely, of course. Of course I have. Absolutely.
Because I use the citation as maybe a tool. Like, okay, if somebody is remorseful, they're sorry. I'm like, they already know what they did is wrong. Maybe, potentially, right? If they're.
I use the citation as a tool. So here's his justification. Yeah, and I'm still a good guy. I gave him a citation based not on, let's say, a traffic infraction, but based on he wasn't nice to me. He committed contempt of cop. That's what Ted Stern is saying here. I gave a citation based on contempt of cop, based on I got my feels hurt.
Like, I'm sorry, I definitely did it. I screwed up. I'm like, okay, this person knows that what they did was wrong. If I get somebody who goes, oh, this is crap, you're being cheesy, you shouldn't pull me over, I'm like, this person is less likely to correct their behavior based on what I know. Somebody who's apologetic is more likely to correct their behavior, not do it again. Somebody who doesn't see that what they did is wrong, they don't even see it as wrong, that's somebody who's unlikely to correct their behavior. Maybe this citation will teach them, shit, I probably should avoid doing that in the future. So that's why I would, with somebody who's not respectful, not agreeing that they did anything wrong, I'm more likely to give them a citation.
Unbelievable justification. So he puts himself in the seat of a behavioral specialist. Ted here is going to correct your behavior by giving you a citation that's going to monetarily, economically terrorize you. You know, $200 ticket, $300 ticket, that could bury somebody. People are living paycheck to paycheck just to try to make ends meet, and then here comes Mr. Police Officer because your license plate wasn't properly illuminated, or you didn't activate your turn signal when he thought you should, and now you're going to give him lip. Now you're going to commit contempt of cop. Now you're going to hurt his feelings. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll be writing you this citation, and then I'm going to write you this citation. They don't care. That is being an evil person. And that testifies to the objective truths we're going to go over and lay down the logic trail of why all cops are bad. And this is just one example.
So, yeah.
Do they have a constitutional right to be disrespectful to you?
Yeah, of course they do. Yes.
Now, I posted this years ago up on social media, and I didn't realize this was a problem. I disagree with that. All right. I got to know Sheriff Richard Mack of the Constitutional Peace Officers Association and Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. And I started looking at things like, and it's just my view. Like I started to disagree with traffic tickets, you know, and we could argue it's revenue generation and all this kind of stuff. And then
I sort of disagree with traffic tickets. We can argue whether it's revenue generation. You know damn good and well, Dominic, that traffic law trumps the Constitution in the eyes of every single patrol officer. And you know that you don't have any right. No American has any rights during a traffic stop. If you don't have the right to just pull away from this traffic stop or this guy with the blue lights, if you're not free to travel down the road, you are not free. You've lost all of your rights. You can't even go anywhere. And if you do, they're going to deploy all the resources and the manpower of the state to bring you to bear. You know good and well, Dominic, that issuing traffic citations is absolutely a revenue generating scheme concocted by the evil people of the state. You know that.
Again, it's subjective, but I started to look at things of, am I basing citations off of attitude? The job of the police officer is to keep the peace and maintain order in a free society. It's to keep the peace and maintain order in a free society.
That's not even true. The true job of a police officer is to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And that's the oath they took. It's not to keep the peace. It's not to do anything but to protect rights. Oh, that guy's rights are being trampled? Oh, that guy committed a crime against that person and left a real material victim. But you know what the cops actually act out and what they actually do? They become the victimizers. They steal from you. They intrude upon your rights. They harm you. They harass you. The very things that if you did the same thing without a uniform, badge, and a gun and the authority of the state, if you did the same thing to other people that police officers do to you, you would rightly be deemed as a criminal in society.
So I asked cops, I said, how many of you, this was like 10 years ago, how many of you base your traffic citation on the attitude or the words of the driver? Tons. Yeah, of course I do. Of course, I said, because it's changed my behavior. It's not
interesting. If his story is true, then his words line up with exactly what Ted Stern just said. Absolutely. Of course I do. This is a crazy, crazy video and crazy admissions by two former police officers. And we know this is true across the board.
Not their job to change somebody's behavior. That's the court's job. It's the job. Now, if you say, yes, I'm going to document.
That's not even true. It's not the court's job to change your behavior. It's the court's job to make sure that true criminals get punished.
The instant, right? Because that's your job, is to report what you've observed, clearly, eradicate violence through use of force when necessary. But when a cop says, and this is the pebble in the pond that starts the ripple effect for a tidal wave. So it's my job to change their behavior. No, it's not. No, it's not. When you stop a car, somebody's speeding, they're doing 35 over. You stop them, and they pulled over, you immediately stopped the behavior that they were breaking the law for. The issuance of the citation purely without any question should be on the action that you saw. So I always sat there and said, you decide. I was an FTO. You decide, period, whether or not you're going to write the citation before you make it up to the car, period. When that driver, it doesn't matter if that driver tells me to go f my mother. It doesn't matter if they suck their teeth and don't say anything. Anything based off of that is personal. It's subjective. You might have somebody look and go, you know what, officer, I really don't give a shit about your ticket. And you could be like, I'm gonna write it. I'd be like, okay, well, you're just a piece of shit, has a bad fucking day, doesn't bother me. It starts there. It starts there when we start to look at why are we issuing citations? Why are we, when do we decide that discernment? And I don't know about you. I've had tons of use of force instruction, report writing, DUI, juvenile officer, gang schools. I've never taken a class on officer discretion. Never. So that is a starting point where we have to look at is how many.
Why would you have to take a class on officer discretion? You wouldn't have to if you were a good person. And if you were a good person, you wouldn't sign on the dotted line to be an enforcer over others. But you don't need a class on officer discretion. All you need to know is, hey, you know what? I'm just here to protect rights. And if there are crimes, if there are criminals, I'm going to apprehend the criminals on behalf of society so that we can remove the true criminals who are harming, threatening to harm, damaging property, stealing property. I'm going to remove those criminals from society for the sake of the collective, for the sake of society. But you should not have to take officer discretion courses. You should already know it in your brain. You should already have a moral compass and determine what's right and what's wrong. You should have the wisdom to apply knowledge in your life to determine who actually committed a crime and who are the innocent people that need to be left alone. And I don't need to be part of the equation as a badged law enforcer victimizing other people and economically terrorizing them because the state told me that I need to meet a quota.
Many cops don't even know what the Constitution is. And I've argued this with other cops where when we start to say it's our job to change that behavior, no, it's not. Our presence could, a citation could, but when we start to say, no, I'm there to change your behavior, that's the courts. And the court gives us, and the court and the Constitution give us responsibility to that. And we can circle around all that all day long, but that's where we start. And that's where I started to notice, shit, how many times did I have a partner pull over for a backup and you walk up to the car? What's going on? I'm giving this bitch everything. Why? She gave me attitude. The fuck, dude? You're on ticket number 6. That's a problem.
Yeah, that is a problem. But you know what's a greater problem? Not just the cop who's given 6 citations to a lady that he calls a biatch. He's a problem because he didn't stop it. He knew what was going on, but he didn't intervene on behalf of that lady that he swore to protect and defend. This is getting really good.
That's police corruption. That is where it starts. That is, my wife's f***ing my neighbor. I hate my kids. I'm out of shape. I go to work. Command staff shit on me, told me to write this report for the 3rd fucking time. I'm going to go out and take it out on another human being because I can. How many people? You're humanizing the badge. I think it takes the most intense person on the planet, who at many, many times I was not, to sit there and say, I cannot let this shit trickle down on the very citizens that I'm accountable for. So I'm a massive idealist, and that's where it starts.
And I can totally agree with the perspective that cops need more training, that we need a better focus on how they use their discretion. Are they using it in ways that's very unconstitutional? Are they using it in ways that make sense given the law and their authority? All those discussions are valid. And I think we're going to agree on a lot of those points. What I'm worried about, Dominic, just to be transparent, is that when you make a statement like, hey, all cops are bad, it's going to turn a lot of people off to listening to the further message you might have about those topics you and I would both agree on. Like, we got to improve training. We got to, limit cops abusing their power, all that. But it is it's the same way a lot of people speak when they see a cop misbehaving, doing something bad. They're all shit. Therefore, they're all bad. Mm-hmm. And I could come up with a ton of examples. A surgeon performs a bad surgery while they're high on their own supply. All surgeons are bad. A lawyer misuses their credentials. All lawyers are bad. I mean, with your logic, it seems like with any career, I could say all football players are bad because Aaron Hernandez murdered somebody. I mean, so by your logic, couldn't I then say any career, they're all bad? Literally, they're all bad? Or
Now, this is a good question, and this is where I want to talk about the objective truth of why all cops are bad, because Dominic Izzo does not have the answer. And if you asked him for the answer, he would go all around the world to try to give it. And then when he finally lands, when he finally sticks something, it's only his opinion. Here's why all cops are bad. Because every cop has agreed, as part of his job, to enforce laws. All the laws. That's number one. Number two, many of those laws are manifestly unjust, cruel, and even evil. So as a requirement for the job, number three, as a requirement for the job, every cop has agreed to act as an enforcer of laws that are unjust, cruel, and evil. And that comes from Robert Higgs. I don't even know how you could distill it anymore. Your job, and you agreed to the job, is to enforce every single laws. And they even make a hypocritical oath. I swear to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, which equals, I swear to protect the rights of every single American in my jurisdiction. And yet they contradict that by saying ... and the laws of the state. So it's inherently contradictory and inherently evil to agree to enforce unjust laws that are evil. And that's why all cops are bad, because they swore to enforce, because government is not eloquence, it's not reason, it's force. And like fire, it's a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Well, cops are fearful masters, and they are not servants, even though they say they're there to protect and serve. So contrary to what Dominic Izzo says, and contrary to what Ted Stern believes, all cops, according to logic, according to sound reasoning, are bad based on their own oath and based on their own desire to lord their power over other people. We're just going to go a couple more minutes with this.
Yeah, you can, and you should, and that's the responsibility. Number one, it sounds horrible. I'm not out to make friends. I don't give a shit. And this is the other part too. Do you not think that I would love to have ended my profession and put myself in a position to where I could go to some blue line event and not wonder which one of these motherfuckers wants to start shit? I would love if I didn't have current cops and ex-cops and social media blue check marks cops did not have the balls. None of these have the balls to ever talk about anything in their social media, but they'll come to my stuff, right? And it's all because of exactly what you said, how I said it. But how did we get? But how did we get here today? How I said something. How I said something triggered something in you. You were not pleased with it. Let's have a discussion. Now it's going to take the people, because remember, I told you, people are tone deaf, brain dead. The American citizen is full of shit. They always lie.
One of the reasons cops want to have discussions with this guy is because he doesn't make any sense, and he's not consistent, and he doesn't have organized thoughts, and he doesn't have an objective criteria by which to make his statement. That's why people want to talk with him. Do you think people want to talk to somebody who's actually logical and reasonable and actually articulates exactly why all cops are bad? And here's the proof. It's your own words that proves that the entire system and everybody in it is bad. You're the hypocrite who said you would uphold the Constitution and the laws of the state. That's like saying, yeah, I'll start the fire with a bowl of water. You're not starting any fire with a bowl of water. Yeah, I'm going to protect freedoms by demolishing freedoms. You're not protecting freedoms by issuing citations and traffic law that supersedes the Constitution in the eyes of the law enforcers who say they're there to protect and serve. You're not protecting and serving anybody but yourself and your system and your state while you're saying you're protecting the very people that you're victimizing. Nobody wants to talk to a person like that, but they'll talk to Dominic Izzo because he makes no freaking sense.
Lie all the time. You're not going to get a percentage of it. I want the pebbles that are going to go into the pond that cause a tidal wave. When I say all cops are bad, yeah, surgeons are great. Lawyers are great. Whatever else it is. There is no other profession where you deal with people at the volume of what law enforcement does. And it's not like Starbucks, to where if I go there today and you order a grande latte with 2 shots and whatever, and I screw it up, all right, I screwed up that order. I have to memorize this, get this right, blah, blah. in the process of the learning curve, law enforcement, for the most part, to my knowledge, is one of the only professions that their learning curve is in action, other jobs are too, where it can cost someone's freedom or life. Maybe brain surgeons, heart surgeons, all this, but they don't get to that point. You know, you could work on a cadaver for years, all this stuff. You don't really get that in law enforcement. So the day that you wind up doing something and shit, oh, I arrested that guy, and you look back on it. And I use this example all the time. I was eager as hell in my first year.
Now, before we listen to this ridiculous story right here, let me just unpack the Starbucks analogy. It doesn't correlate at all. Here's what would correlate. If when you were training for Starbucks and they were hiring you, as a condition of employment, you swore to serve them the best coffee that you could possibly serve them, while you take that coffee that you're serving them and pouring it on their face. You're promising to serve them the coffee, and then you're also promising to harm them with the coffee that you're serving them with. The same thing with cops. They're saying, I'm going to protect the rights of the people in my zone of influence. I'm going to protect their rights. And the state says I can demolish their rights under, for example, traffic law or whatever, fill in the blank. I'm going to protect their rights as I demolish their rights. I'm going to serve them that coffee while I'm pouring hot coffee on their face. You're not serving anybody by pouring hot coffee on their face. You're not serving anybody by economically terrorizing them under traffic law, which you believe supersedes the Constitution, which you swore to protect, defend, and uphold. But listen to this ridiculous story that highlights just how evil this guy was, and the justifications that he's willing to make, and the justifications that Ted Stern is willing to accept.
6 o'clock in the morning, and I wanted overtime, so I pulled the guy over. It turns out he had an expired driver's license 6 months. So in Illinois, that's no valid. Man, overtime. Shit. Guy was 60-something years old on his way to work. I stop him, do a street booking, tow his car. Guy had been driving longer than I've been alive. And I look back on that and go, the fuck did I do that for? For a stat? For overtime? Holy shit. The learning curve. My learning curve cost somebody hundreds of dollars in tows. God knows if he made it to work on time. Ruined his fucking day because I was learning.
He didn't destroy that guy's life. By the way, you can potentially destroy that guy's life. Not only would he miss a day of work, he could be fired from his job for what that officer did, for what this guy did. This isn't a learning curve. It's not a learning curve to economically devastate and terrorize somebody and hold them basically at gunpoint and harass them. He's chalking that off to learning curve. That's not learning curve. That's you being evil toward another individual. That's you doing something to somebody that you wouldn't want done to yourself. That proves how evil this profession is, because they use all these justifications and they don't go at the heart of the matter. It's like, because I was evil. I was the psychopath who demanded the ring of power. I wanted to lord that power over other people, and I was willing to wield that power against people for overtime or because they committed contempt of cop or whatever. It's amazing the admissions that are coming out of this video.
Now apply that to use of force, taking somebody into custody, shooting them, all this. No, the standard has to be, when I say bad, you have to go in.
By the way, there is one aspect also of that. Yeah, in the learning curve of law enforcement, people's rights are on the chopping block. And when I say learning curve, I'm just talking about the actual position. The actual position of law enforcement jeopardizes rights and puts lives on the chopping block. That aspect of it is there. It does exist.
Well, and
but it can't be divorced from the person who's actually bringing the evil into your life. That badged, costumed cop is bringing evil into your life, and he's doing it intentionally. He's doing it willfully, and he's doing it with the consent of his thin blue line buddies who are also doing the same thing. I want to know how many false reports these two guys have written. You know there's a lot. If you're willing to give a citation to an individual because they committed contempt of cop, because they had a bad attitude toward you, and you're going to correct that attitude by issuing 6 citations, then you're lying on a report. You're liars. You're hypocrites. You're thieves. You're economic terrorists. You're true terrorists. You're domestic terrorists.
You have to go in law enforcement like this profession is f***ed. I refuse, because we are months away from 2025. And the video that I sparked this was of the I can't remember what state it was, guy trying to hang himself in the back of a squad car. And what does the dumb cop do? Open the door, starts dropping elbows on his head. And you have people saying, oh, he's trying to save his life. Okay. We still have people who will say, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Well, the guy shouldn't have resisted all this shit. And he's on camera, which poses the question, how is it 2024? 2025 is around the corner. And we still have these men and women who are getting hired, who are tainting the profession. They are bad, and they still do this shit. And everybody...
Wait a minute. They're tainting a profession? How can you taint a profession that you already said is tainted before that cop gets there? The profession is tainted because it requires people who otherwise might have been good. It draws the psychopaths, and those psychopaths swear to protect and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States, and they say that they're going to bring down on your head and my head the evil, wicked, cruel laws of law enforcement. You can't taint a profession like that. It's kind of like you can't add stink to a turd. It already is stinky.
But you know, again, this is a question. You had said in 11 years you served, you really didn't witness anything, and it's. I'm not going to put you on the spot.
Okay, that's where I'm going to stop. Now, if you want me to do an extended video, like maybe even a live stream so that we can all kind of get in on this and, you know, you can add your comments. None of us is greater than all of us. Let me know if you want to do that live stream. That, like I said, this is an hour and 20 minutes about an original video is an hour and 20 minutes. What do you think about Dominic Izzo? What do you think about Ted Stern? What do you think about law enforcement in general? Is it logical to say that all cops are bad because they actually swore to uphold unjust, evil, and cruel laws while they're claiming to protect and serve? Isn't that different from any other profession that you know of? Is there a profession that is inherently corrupt like that? Leave your thoughts about this for the world and the global thought police in the comments section below. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell notification icon, give it a thumbs up, share it with everybody you know. Don't forget to subscribe to my email list through my website, highimpactflix.com. If you want to support the channel further, grab a hard-hitting conversation starting design. You can put on a shirt, hoodie, mug, hat, cell phone case, pillowcase, whatever you want. Become a channel member, but more importantly, realize that there is something called logic, and you can use your brain to articulate it. And if anybody tries to assail that, that's when you have a conversation. But it's got to be based on truth. It's got to be based on honesty. I will see you guys in the next video.